Hey, welcome to episode 9 of The Fistful of Fuckery. And actually, there is something in general. I gotta get some water here. Give me a second. There's something in general that a few fellas, older gentlemen, and generation below me, like the millennials, have been asking me different things. The topic of comics comes up, and it's weird because I realize there's a lot of people that seem to be interested in them. And I guess what throws them off is that either they didn't have access. Again, I am all for you, everybody, doesn't matter who they are, reading comics. Because, like, again, last episode, they're written up to you. But general discussion was around Watchmen. Because a few people don't know that there's two versions of the film. There is the uncut version, which has the Black Freighter, which is a story within a story, which is derived from the graphic novel or the trade paperback because it was individual issues. The Black Freighter is a great story because it explains insanity, because tons of loss and so on and so forth and madness, and it underlines the theme Watchmen. I had to stop a few of my adult friends to bringing their kids to go see this film because I'm like, this is not like Iron Man. This is a lot heavier, violent, and a lot of adult themes. And a lot of people just seem to not be aware of that. So this gentleman had just watched the uncut version of Watchmen, which is the full version. Now, there's a lot of change. There's some changes between the comic book and the movie, but overall the theme is there. And all you're gonna remember when you go watch the sequel show, which I advise you to watch on HBO, the end of the novel is giant squid. So if you've watched the movie, the uncut version of the movie, a lot of the themes do travel over. Just you understand the difference between the ending of the movie and of the comic is different. One's very comic book-ish. The other one's like a harsh reality, Holocaust of some sort. And so when you go to watch a series, it kind of passes over and you miss the panic. Like the thing I noticed that people watching it when it came out, they were like, what's the deal with the squids? I'm like, oh yeah, because you didn't read the book. So gotta kind of update them with that. So the Watchmen's very heavy. It's a very heavy book. It's I remember Time magazine declaring it a comic book. Very dense comic book by Allan Moore, which I advise you read a lot of Allan Moore stuff. It's just a heavy book. And I remember Times saying it was like top 100 best novels in the 20th century. And so the person suggested, like, is there anything else I could be reading? And I'm going to actually pull it up right now. Yeah, and I said Kurt Busiek wrote a great book back in the day. He did the Marvels with Alex Ross, and they ended up doing a long series, which I think is in a couple of volumes, if I remember correctly. And it's a series called Astro City. And I remember the first time I read this, it kind of floored me. Like I wasn't expecting it to be as detailed or as, I don't know, equal to, almost to a certain degree, Watchmen. I realized that a lot of the material helps with adapting heroes and Citizens together, like it creates a different universe, but not as dark or as negative as Watchmen. Watchmen seemed to be like all gearing up to its hard end, where this collection of graphic novels by Busick and Alex Ross, a few people involved. Yeah, I'll give you the names. Brent Anderson, Kurt Busick, Alex Ross, and Will Blyberg, another person. So these are in collections. You can get them now. I think that they've been reissued as Metro series, because I know so many Metro books, which is like issue 12 issues, the 6-issue volume 1, and 1 through 12 volume 2. But you can get the old ones. Life in the Big City, Confession, Family Tree, Family Album, Tarnished Angels, Local Heroes. And then there's 2 parts, the Dark Age book, Shining Stars. Like, it goes on for quite some time. I think the series ended at some point. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, I think. No, he still lives in Boston. He's still alive. Okay, so I advise you to check that out. It's one of those books that, if you're like, okay, I really Marvel, DC, like really heavy books, sometimes it's better to get a book that you're just not familiar with any of the stuff to kind of get into it, rather than living up in the shadow of like how these characters play out. It's like, I know I've been talking about Absolute Batman, Absolute Wonder Woman, Absolute Superman. That you can get into because it's a different universe, but the problem with that is eventually you're going to get into the whole Darkseid debacle, and you're going to have to understand what exactly is that you're looking at when it comes to that. And sometimes for new readers, that is a heavy burden, especially if you're just casually reading. So I'll suggest that. I mean, if you're going to read certain books for mainstream, if the 2 top of my head, Spider-Man Torment with the Todd McFarlane run, you don't really need to have anything existing prior to that. It's a decent story. You're just going to know that the outcome of Craven. The Batman Year 1, Batman Year 2, those are pretty good pieces. I know I suggested them last episode, but I'm just bringing them up because a few people have actually taken my reference in regards to Astro City and have gone into it. Another great, again, I can't tell you, I know it's a fucking crazy wingnut running HBO, but if somebody was smart, they would just bring a large fucking dump truck of money to Maria and David Lapham's fucking house and just give them all the fucking money for their Stray Bullets series, because that is a crazy fucking series. Non-superhero series. Non-linear. It's great gangster shit. So I would advise you to check that out too. So Astro City by Kurt Busick. If you have to go with either Spider-Man or Batman Year 1, Year 2, Spider-Man Torment, the McFarlane. A lot of people remember it from the Arachne Knight. The first 13 issues of Spider-Man back in the 90s was fucking amazing. Still kind of beloved. Like, those covers are dopest fucking covers ever. This before McFarlane went to do the Spawn series. So if you need to, I need the familiarity or something, those are the 2 books you can kind of grab a low totem. And what's great is both of them in circulation for quite some time. I'm not sure how easy Torment is to get. It's like the first 5 or 6 issues of that run. But if you look for something that, I would advise something that's like completely different. Like, it's something you're not out of your wheelhouse, something you're not really familiar with. Astro City is definitely a way to go. And Stray Bullets. Stray Bullets, I think El Capitan, I think it's Image that's releasing them now. So I definitely advise that. And I know we suggested it in, I think season one of the end of the episodes, I suggested it because there was a period of time I had at least 15 people reading that series. Because I'm pretty communal about shit. Like, I'll let people borrow books and whatnot. So, and they're like, this is fucking nuts. I'm like, yeah, that whole opening issue, if you're not sold in Stray Bullets by issue one, then there's something fucking wrong with you. You're just a very cynical person. Or you like really like shit. Like, I like reading shit. Or I like watching shit. Like, okay. It's like somebody trying to sell me on the John Wick thing. I know. Like, everybody's like, well, how do you not like John Wick? I really had a hard time with the first fucking movie. And I know supposedly it gets better after the fact, but I have yet to this point sat down and decided, I'm going to fucking watch these three films. I tried watching one a few times, and it was just, I don't know. It just didn't work the way it should have worked. It's one of those things, it's too over the top to a certain degree. So maybe it's just me. So, Free Radio America, if anybody's even checking in on this from that. The thing I didn't realize I needed in my life was the Melvins and with Napalm Death. That is apparently an album that's coming out. It's going to be on Epicac. Tossing Coins into the Fountain of Fuck is just, yeah. I was so on board with that. Descendants released that they're going to be putting out. I know they're going to be touring with Social Distortion in the fall. Descendants always worth checking out. But they actually released. They said the April 24th, their album Enjoy is being reissued. If you don't know, there's been a long period of time where Descendants hadn't reissued any of their stuff in vinyl. I think you can get things from the last print here and there, and like some CDs here and there, but this is a cleanup, definitely official reissue. They did it to Moyle Goes to College. I Don't Want to Grow Up, and this is the Enjoy. It's out again April 24th. Another album that's coming down the pipeline, EP I should say, is McCluskey. I'm sure I'm getting sick of This Bowling Alley EP. Or mini album, whatever they want to call it. Another release in Epicac. And it's great because McCluskey, last major release was last year. Around this time. I think they're digitally releasing it sometime in March, but the actual official release is coming out in May. So we can definitely jump on top of that. What else was there that came out, kind of made me go, that's fucking awesome. Black Crow's new album sounds pretty good. Gogo Bordello, not a big fan of it, but I like the opening track, so I'm kind of looking at that. The last Gogo Bordello album I listened to a lot was Pure Vita Conspiracy. That was the last album I kind of heavily rotated. That Billy Bragg song, City of Heroes, is fucking aggressive. It's great. It's probably one of the better ones. I know the Joint Ice is another by satirical fucking take on shit by Jesse Wells. But I know Steve Colbert did the whole like just fucking throw your song on my show. And the Sting. I know the address tonight, the State of the Union address was tonight, and somebody was like, it just fucking yammering for like 2 hours. I'm probably going to go through the whole thing at some point. I mean, I listened to the Obama speech, and there's a couple things that really kind of caught me. The interview we had a few weeks ago. And the idea of like the way protests should be loud and like fun and like don't lose that. That's the one thing the hippies definitely fucking got right. And the goal is not to be in the Chicago trap. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Chicago 7, Trial of Chicago 7 is on Netflix. '68, Chicago, a lot of bad shit happened there. But they were able to kind of try to put them in the conspiracy, and it was a bunch of bullshit. But the goal is to understand these mechanics and have fun with it, like the clown mask and strap-ons. I mean, that right there will catch fucking news. I mean, what he liked was the fact that there was a band playing every night, and then he added levity to the situation. And I thought that was really interesting. And in despite of Yahoos, again, it's funny because like you talk to people that you've known for years, and they just fucking don't budge in their brain at all. And I found it interesting that John Oliver's coverage of this is showing you the fucking Yahooism that is ICE, and just the hiring that. I mean, again, back in the '90s, I argued that this one might be a thing, but I didn't realize they were going to overreach at the time. What was it called? Department of Immigration, right? ICE comes out of the Homeland Security in the early 2Ks. So that's a thing. Again, protests, I mean, even Obama said it, just have, like, it's your best civil disobedience. It's, if you want to make a circus in life, dare to make the circus in life. If people are going to stop fucking killing people because they're making circuses in life, that's a bad fucking thing, right? You know, you're doing something completely fucked up and wrong. You're doing the devil's work right there, pal. So that's enough for that. The one thing I want to touch on is social pyramid, and we keep recreating this fucked up thing. This powers on top, anointed many generations deep, with unlimited resources. And I know I referenced Power Elite. Somebody asked me about that, and I said, well, it's C. Wright Mills concept. And I know that over the years, like, you know, what you're trying to say, there's a lot of, like, the debate back and forth. But realistically, like, the end result of what he wrote back in the 50s, whether it has to be fine-tuned, to my understanding it was, you got to take in consideration that nobody looked at the unchecked laissez-faire business and ultra wealthy and how much they wanted. And that was very unclear. And from that point to this point, it's very clear. We see the yielded results. So somebody asked me, like, well, what I mean by that, I think the best example of the lowest tier of the power elite would be your what? The people have to be inundated in the larger society thinking everything's functional to a certain degree. So they become propagated. So cops, firefighters, EMT, they're the lower legs of that. You know, obviously the ones that are higher up are the ones that the doctors and so on and so forth, the people that run the police and so on and so forth. And if that was the case, then voting for cops would be a standard thing, especially neighborhood cops. But we're not doing that. We're not trying to get more democracy in what we're trying to whittle away democracy. You know, and that's a debate for another time. But I think the idea of having effective neighborhood cops would reduce a lot of bullshit. But that goes back to the whole, we're not micromanaging or microstructuring neighborhoods. We want the neighborhoods to work as like the peasants. You know, and some neighborhoods we want to lean out of and watch them fall apart. So they become cheaper for the power elite that comes in after the fact. People on a higher echelon. I mean, again, I grew up in a burned out city. It was pretty obviously, you know, a very valuable place. But the way it was treated over the years was just fucking horrifying. Like there was no reprieve at all. You know, and in regards to the cops being the lower tier of the power elite, like one of the best examples I can give you now is cops, when they pass on the job from whatever incidents that may happen, they're honored, right? I knew a cop that ended up passing away because he made a bad decision in order to chase somebody and felt his death, right? That's fucking terrible. But it's part of the job. I mean, it can't happen, right? And that's why we kind of like we want to give them a lot of grace to a certain degree, but sometimes the power, that really corrupts a lot of things, right? Why I know that was the bottom tier is because of how looked at it was and how written about, talked about when a week later or a few weeks later, right, there was a factory worker who died of a freak accident inside of a factory. A piece of wood splintered out and just stabbed him right in the chest, right, as he was passing by, a bandsaw. And that didn't give as much coverage. And that's a fucking freak accident. So that tells you where the citizenry and where, the lower level of the power elite is in general. This is a thing. Now, some will argue like, okay, yeah, well, the pyramid structure is there because people have to be empowered. I completely understand. But if you're looking to solve a lot of the problems, a lot of the elements of a society, and you want people to be participatory, right? And you want them to engage, then it should be democratized to a certain degree. Now, are there violent instances, like genuine violent instances, like, a monster came out and started eating a bunch of people? Hypothetically speaking, obviously. Fictitious, crazy shit, right? Then, yeah, there should be a group of people to engage the monster with a bullet, right? Or ensnaring it or whatever for eating people. There's always going to be that. You're right. But pretty sure a person trying to investigate things would find it a lot easier if the neighborhood understood who they were and what they were. And maybe even get tips, maybe become aware of things before the shit actually goes sour. But there's a rigid structure there. And I'm pointing it out. And I think Seymour Mills was correct to a certain degree, because I think he focused on the military. And that falls into that fold too. But it's very clear that laissez-faire business practices, like the way the government, federal government and local governments have treated businesses for so many years, that and businesses gaining the citizenship status as one company is one citizen, that right there tilted the things. And it goes unchecked to a certain degree. We're now paying their tax burdens as a populace, and then the people that are higher up would now they're dwindling their tax burdens and laying it onto us retroactively. So no, I think Mills is pretty much on point. And by proxy, I'll end up using the term. Somebody felt it was outdated, and that was a gray area I figured I would cover. Now, I made it clear last episode that I could probably resolve all this stuff by the end of this season. That's if you guys want me to. That's fine. I do have stuff laid out for season 4. And there's a couple approaches. I could take this whole weird script approach and start referencing things here and there and really change the nature of what I'm doing. And I'm going to eventually do this at some point. But my goal is a proletariat to talk to proletariats, to talk to people, working people, average people, everyday people, from a fluid thought process, right? I know I'm scattered. Sometimes I'm all over the place. I mean, I just jumped from albums released to talking about Seymour Mills' Power Elite. But the reason why I do it like this and have it really informal is kind of like it somehow seems effective. Like, I've talked to people. I've written stuff years ago. There was a period of time people wanted me to go further academically when it comes to different fields of study. And I opted not to. And they're like, well, why? Why don't you want to write for these journals? And I said, because nobody's going to read them. everyday people like don't really see the things. And when you talk to, again, even people I've known for years, and I'm gonna keep burning that fucking thing. You figure at some point in time what I said would click and give me clout. I mean, you're a general audience right now. You're like, I haven't heard anything you said that's clicked yet, right? But if I've said anything that's made come to revelation, like again, I told you, yahoos in Minnesota, yahoos, circus freaks in positions of power with guns, unchecked, badly trained. John Oliver said, yes, follow that up. First episode, I shit you not. Why? It didn't require much thinking about it. It required an analysis going, Jesus Christ. Did we watch a bunch of shit and we idolize a bunch of shit and we're acting as if? That's a raw reaction. And I can give you that. I can give you pretty good assessments about things. Right? Like, there's talk right now about the fact that at any point in time, the powers that be want to do something fucking radical. They can not only send this into chaotic warfare and topple the economy that's been built and strong since 2009. But you'll also act like, oh, I just did something. Probably spent 2 hours saying he did. No, that's not a thing. Okay, it's been building that strong since. I already told you 2013, 2014, definitely by 2014, we had the economy. We still kind of do. We, as in people, everyday workers. Now, the only exception to this are people that live in economies in this country that have a lot of rich people running the economy. That's trickle-down structure. The fact that they were given that much power is fucking insane. But people are desperate, right? I will repeat that social Darwinism isn't a thing. It's a game designed. It's not like Darwinism. It's somebody taking Darwinism and going, oh, society's like that. No, you made it like that. Use that pendulum economy from the 70s up until, 2009 when everything fucking finally melted down. Actually, it was the end of 2008. When the fucking Bush had to get on TV and say, yeah, I'm eating crow right now. And Obama had to come in and Obama administration had to come in and kind of change all that. That happened. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And when we gained that clout, we weren't told we were gaining that clout. And then I told you the other day, this is the interesting article I got from Atlantic, is that apparently economists can't really measure things forwards unless it's something that happened in the past. Their model system does not design them to do such a thing. That, coupled with laissez-faire business practices, gives you, again, the whole middle thing. There's definitely people saying, we want this. We don't want to be part of this. We don't want this democracy destroying our way of life. We want them to foot the bill and be happy. We want them to go in and save the houses and then work real diligently when we bring up the taxes on the houses, and then eventually we would just buy them out. Or if they refuse to sell, we'll just keep them there long enough to the point where they price themselves out. And then they lose everything. That's the world we're living in right now. So, I'm stepping away, and I'm deciding whether you guys want me to do this to the end. After this episode, I have 4 more. I have 10, 11, 12, and 13 season finale. And this episode will actually be talking about Allan Moyle, because I went through his discography at one point in time, a lot of his films, and I noticed he's basically the alt to John Hughes, a little more intrusive and in your face. And the three films highlight Times Square, Pump Up the Volume, and Empire Records. So we'll be doing that today. I'm trying to think of anything else. The topic. I know The Bride's coming out on the 6th. I'm interested to go in to see that. The second trailer for Supergirl looks really fucking good. For those of you out there don't know, Supergirl, unlike Superman, was an adolescent when Krypton had its demise. So this movie would probably have a lot more of that in a reaction to that, and substance abuse and just dealing with that darkness. Kal-El, unfortunately, had none of that. He was a baby when he left. So I'm interested in that. I know the Spider-Man thing is, I think, around the same time. But honestly, there's nothing I've seen so far that made me go, oh, yeah, I really need to see that. Daredevil's coming out. I'm interested in seeing that. There's a few things coming out of the pipeline. Trying to think of what else. Descendants, reissue of Ed Joy, New McCluskey, Telenova, that looks like The Warning, that looks like a really good album. I know I should be picking that up soon. I'm not sure if the vinyl's been released yet, but I've been listening to the album. It's pretty good. Megadeth's last album was really good too, surprisingly. Not surprisingly. It made it seem to put a lot more energy into it. So, but the Melvins and Napalm Death, that surprised me. Again, was not expecting that whatsoever. I know I talked about Exquisite Corpses at some point in time. That's, I think, in issue 10. I think that eventually should be resolving. That's it. That's all I'm going on right now. So we'll be waiting for the B block. So I'm covering some Allan Moyle. And if you guys are not familiar with him, there's probably a few of you that might know who this individual is. Pump Up the Volume, 1990, Christian Slater and Samantha Mathis. That was, for a lot of alternate teens, that was a big fucking deal film. But what's weird is I ended up, at the time I was already into film, so I ended up diving into different collections. And I realized this film is such a weird counter to Breakfast Club, John Hughes' Breakfast Club. Because John Hughes' Breakfast Club is a good film. It explores a lot of the, stereotypical adolescence at the time in, the fake town of, Sherman, Illinois. So what happened is Moyle's Pump Up the Volume ended up changing a lot of the narrative because it dove in a direction that Breakfast Club really didn't. To my understanding, little side note, Breakfast Club, there is a complete version that supposedly, I guess, John Hughes' estate has. I remember hearing that somewhere at some point in time. There was an uncut director's cut, a version he had originally wanted. I was always curious if they would ever release that, but it explores a lot of some of the ideas, follows them through different alternate scenes, different scenes shot not actually in the original film. But those films were interesting. But there was an edge to Moyle's films that didn't seem to exist in a lot of the adolescent stuff. Now, modern adolescence shows up in, probably screamingly so, in Bad News Bears. 76 version, the very original Bad News Bears with Matthau. And that really kind of puts the modern kid into the cinema. I'm growing up around this, this in the 80s and whatnot. And I'm realizing that these kids are closer to real kids than some of the films we watched. Moyle's films kind of dive into the visceral nature of music and its play in most of his films and the adolescents' reactions to it and the energy they pull from it. And it's really interesting because one of the first films, which was Times Square, covers it from the almost like an adolescent reaction And what's weird is at the period of time this is coming out, this is released in 1980. Drama film, girl has diagnosed with mental health issues. There's a runaway component to it. They end up in a punk band, which I thought was interesting. Tim Curry is actually the voice of the narrative voice that they go to meet. And it's interesting because that tone eventually obviously shows up at Pump Up the Volume more intimately. But what I found interesting was that Tim Curry, the way they looked at and framed it in the film was that the DJ, going back to Allan Freed, and was still respected by the adolescents. And I thought that was really clever. I mean, the film fires a weird way, and I'm not sure if it's because the decision for editing at the end or the way it treated. There was a brief interview. There was issues with his directing, or something to that effect, or where he laid in the film. But it plays off relatively well. It's good. I've seen it on streaming, showing up on USA back in the day. I watched it. There was a period of time it was on, I think, Cinemax. So it does rotate in every so often. Again, I'm not sure if they're actually ever going to do a box set for Allan Moyle. I think they should. A collection of his stuff, because some of his stuff is out of print, to my understanding. Up into including Weirdsville, which I've seen pieces of, never seen the whole thing from beginning to end. But the three films I'm going to cover: Times Square, Pump Up the Volume, and Empire Records. I think it's interesting to comment on them because it does influence a lot of generation, and it takes direction. Whereas a lot of John Hughes films have a tendency to be comfortable in their own suburban squalor, loosely battling classism in a very strange way. So, like I said, Tim Curry is the DJ personality in the film. At the time, Tim Curry would probably have been the most known out of the whole film. You had a few actresses in the film. I'll give it to a few seconds. You had Trina Alvarado and Robin Johnson. And essentially, again, the film itself does directly the idea of the adolescent teen is being frameworked with the mental health diagnosis on being looked at and almost casted in a specific point of view. Both characters are from two different walks of life, but they kind of join together based on this. Their ability to travel is, like, again, a whole idea of freedom. Like there's another movie called Over the Edge, which I do advise you to watch. There's a lot of these really great snapshots in American cinema that capture American adolescence, especially during that period of time, really, really well. Over the Edge does a great job too. Allan Moyle has nothing to do with that though. So this film has these girls seeking out the DJ. And I thought that was interesting because during this period of time, a lot of disc jockeys still retain that power. What's weird is the delusion you exist right now on air is they don't. They don't have the power of the music. They don't have the power. They just parrot. Here's a script. Improvise as much as you possibly can to keep your audience there. Just squawk for them. So you don't have, unless you have like a syndicated show like the Alice Cooper show and can't remember his name right now off the top of my head. The guy from Little Steve's Underground Garage. Like their syndicated shows, obviously their personality, their input, their thought process is what makes that work. We don't, at a standard radio station, you don't have that as much anymore. You only have the syndicated shows that come in that will bogart a lot of segment, probably be closer to authentic than not. But on normal radio, you don't have that thing. And I think he does a really good job to express adolescent freedom, the rejection of the norm being classified, the girls establishing the punk band, the idea of like being able to leave and not have a functionalist ending, I thought was really clever. Moyle had the ability to show that, express that cinematically. But at the time, granted, there was some issues with it. Those films during that period of time, that era, from like roughly 78 to about, I don't know, 84. Some of those films, it was before like companies said, "Oh, we can't be showing this." Oh, wait, that's a thing. But at the same point in time, in the country, in the U.S., you have these really weird behavior modification programs for adolescents, and basically drug treatment issues or mental health issues that were being classified as drug treatment at the time. There's a good documentary called Generation RX, and some would argue that a lot of these behavior modification programs, like Back in Control, back in West Coast, really were designed to kind of quell rebellion, quell quell adolescents feeling empowered. And this film does capture that. And obviously, Moyle directed it, and that made it edgy. The writer was Jacob Brackman, and he actually had written The King of Marvin Gardens, which is a Jack Nicholson, Bruce Dern film. And it was interesting because it's one of the few films you see the two switch positions. So Bruce Dern's the more aggressive, Jack Nicholson's toned down. Good film, great film. The combination, what made Moyle interesting is the ability to take on that script, because that, and to find the music that helped define the mood and feel of that film. I, again, briefly just watched an interview with him. It's weird because he doesn't seem to understand, at least the way I gleaned it, that how much he became a pioneer in this aspect. Because he's pretty consistent. Because if you think about it, like Penelope Fierce would probably be another person that would fall into this category. Because they're giving voice to things that up until a certain point, all you really had was the 60s voice. The hippies, yippies, you had that. And even then, when this movie came out, that wasn't necessarily focused on. I mean, when I grew up, a lot of the data you had to dig for and find out about and talk to people about during that era wasn't a pop culture thing. If anything, it was mocked to a certain degree. So the adolescence from the 60s was not looked at in the same framework. And again, cinematically, the first time you're given a modern day adolescent is in Bad News Bears. And from that point on, it's trying to find that adolescent or that culture coming of age in the 70s is like Over the Edge. Trying to think of my favorite, My Bodyguard, but I think that's what it's called. There's different films that kind of capture, because they do a good job. Like Meatballs was the first time you see young people, my recollection, trying to play themselves, but doing it in a very like awkward way that made it work. Again, Times Square was the first Allan Moyle film that kind of brought that to light. Jump literally a decade later, you have Pump Up the Volume. Pump Up the Volume takes place in suburbia, but it makes sure it punctuates the fact that Mark Hunter, Christian Slater's character, is actually from the East Coast. So he's immersed in a lot of those cultures, which is a weird and direct tie-in to Times Square. Because in Times Square, you're recognizing that the culture is ripe, and a lot of this stuff is bouncing off each other. Because in the 80s, that's a thing. I mean, New York has always been on point. So he made recognition that he's now in different waters that seem to have a large veneer over it. And Hunter's character, Mark Hunter's character, ends up tackling on that head indirectly and open up a large can of worms just by deciding to, hey, let's just broadcast and fuck around. Let's fuck around and find out. Let's do something slightly rebellious and check this out. And not only that, by doing so, you get Moyle's narrative, because he's the one that actually wrote the screenplay. And you're getting the full alchemy of the thread of thought in regards to music. Because you're getting snapshots of what he's introduced to. You get actually scenario. Like, you get a whole different Beastie Boys song. Actually, the alternate version of this soundtrack to this film is strange, because when I was watching it, and I've watched it a few times, it addressed so much fucking issues, right? But again, so did Times Square. Mental health issues, the treatment of parents and kid relations. At the same point in time, you have a DJ in this movie, but the difference between the DJ in this movie and the DJ from Times Square is obviously a radio DJ that still has clout, still has the ability to maneuver himself in the realm of broadcast, right? He has control, good portions of control. The corporations don't necessarily have the control. Because understand, they put muzzles on these fucking people, right? And then eventually filled them with a bunch of weird conservative hype men. You know, that's why Glenn Beck and all those people kind of did the switch over when all of a sudden the DJ is not the, radical, crazy, wild guy. It's, again, one of the best parodies of those type of guys is actually a Family Guy. We Need the Butt, right? That's kind of just really weird. Some morning shows pull it off, but I forget how much control those DJs do not have over what they're playing. And even the ones that say, you know what, we're gonna do selections, deep dives, but then they'll say archives. That means previous radio managers got approval for these songs. So don't be asking for any other song that's off that we didn't accommodate. Even though it's rock, we'll ignore that. Yeah, I'm a little bitter about that. I'll eventually address it at some other point in time. So anyway, Pump the Volume. Mark Hunter ends up opening up a large can of worms in the middle of suburbia because at the time, standardized testing, standardized structure, SATs, this weird pristine new forge, which kind of indirectly goes with a similar theme from Times Square. You're addressing the issue at some other point in time, right? Mark Hunter was such an interesting influence on a lot of adolescents I grew up with, that when Christian Slater shows up in Mr. Robot, there was so much speculation that was possibly Mark Hunter. And it didn't end up being. And that kind of killed the whole thing. Because for the most part, we know the ending of the film, but dealing with censorship, especially in the 80s and early 90s, told you witch trials, is interesting. And what would happen with Mark Hunter after the fact would have been an actually more interesting story. And him going further underground and keep the fucking voice alive would have been more interesting to do than not. But Mr. Robot didn't give you that. It's funny, too, because as soon as we were watching it, I gave up on the show. But as soon as we were watching it, I'm like going, is this? No, this can't be. Right? Then the reveal, I'm not going to give you the reveal. And you go, fuck this. And that was pretty much about the size of it. So you have the first film, which addresses the power of the DJ and adolescence, the freedom of adolescence, right? And the ability to say what needs to be said. In the second film, you have basically the same thing, right? In the third film, which would be Empire Records, you have a corporation trying to buy a local record store, right? Because at least the building. And in that, you're showing how much the music influences adolescence. Again, all three films address that in a way. All three films are filled with tons of music. Although I will argue that Pump the Volume could have had a better soundtrack. You're like, what? Well, a dual soundtrack. Because there's a lot of songs in Pump the Volume in the film that never make it, and referenced, and never actually make it in the soundtrack. The Beastie Boys scenario was one of the songs. It's played in the movie, it was off of one of the Def Jam recordings. Because understand, there's supposedly rumors that there's archives of Beastie Boys that could probably fill an album. That was the threat that they'd made to them when they went to Columbia. What was it? Was it Columbia? Capitol. Sorry, it was Capitol. And established Grand Royale. So that's interesting. You had the Descendants, right? You had a lot of different. I mean, you had Richard Hell of Voids, right? Voidoids, whatever you want to call them. And I thought that was really interesting. That's all in there. So, Crash Course Descendants, that was the first time I ever heard a Descendants song. Then, prior to that was Angry Samoans, but Angry Samoans not in that film. Empire Records deals with the fact of corporate takeovers. So, if you had small independent radio stations, which they had college stations, right, which they hunted down like beasts. Again, totally celebrate college stations if you can. Then you had radio stations, companies trying to go in and just like literally gut out whatever mom and pop record stores and record shops. Again, I'm going to address the record shop piece at some other point in time. All three films, I advise you to watch. If you haven't seen them yet, if you're young, haven't seen them, watch them. Take away the bullshit. Remove the bullshit out of it. There is a weird Hollywood thing when it comes to at least actually all three films. All three films kind of bathe in it a little. Because it is artifice. I mean, you're watching a film. But there's a lot of authenticity in these films. There's a lot of things being said in commentary put in these films that are actually taking place. Because understand, in the late 80s, early 90s, record stores used to stay open late for releases, especially releases that were very popular amongst adolescents or people. One of the clear run-ups to that, and again, if you're a millennial and younger, this is why I prefaced the whole season with that. You will note that these record stores used to stay open till late. The stations became very popular. College stations kind of blew up, especially in the southeast and New England. And you would have a feeding frenzy going in to go buy these things. People waiting in line to go buy records for midnight because Tuesday used to be release date. So when you're seeing these films and wondering, well, why was this? There was no internet. This is all word of mouth, people following through. You know, what ties Tim Curry literally cultivates in the first film these girls' concerts, right? He's explaining the commentary amongst this. Mark Hunter opens up the bullshit surrounding the school. It's surrounding the treatment of kids. Well, we don't deem you worthy. We have to check your record. Right? And then the biggest power grab is in Empire Records. We're trying to take your record store away from you. We're trying to put it into bankruptcy so we can come in and just put our own record store in there and you can decide what you're doing. Right? All you guys out jobs, you'll figure out the mechanics of this. This was a thing. A lot of record stores back in the day, you know, there's documentaries all over Tubi in regards to this. Radio stations, record stores, like the corporate hand coming in and taking everything and then sanitizing it or put whatever they want in creates a larger problem for you, the person seeking. I mean, I grew up in Fall River, Massachusetts, and trying to find music sometimes was difficult. You literally had to go outside of the city. There were a few stores here and there, but then even then, you know, if you went to some fringe shit, it was hard to find. Or not even fringe shit, just stuff like they acted like punk rock didn't exist in the 80s, despite the fact that there's a whole 0.5 wave that ended up merging right from the whole let's clean everything up and call it new wave, right? And you want a whole commentary about that. There's a great song on Give Me Convenience or Give Me Death by Dead Kennedys called Pull My Strings. And take that in consideration. So Allan Moyle helmed these three films. They did Weirdsville too. most of the films he does is pretty comprehensive, right? They're good. But these three particular films made, in my opinion, a lot of John Hughes films look not as stellar as they should have been, because he was literally driving the narrative through. Like, he could not do that, right? He could not helm these films and just kind of let them go by wayside, but he didn't. He took on the task and built the worlds and the weighing system, the things that are valuable amongst these adolescents. So again, Times Square, Pump the Volume, and Empire Records. Again, any film this man worked on, you should probably check out. Is pretty decent discography. Filmography. I don't know why I keep saying discography. I'm so used to the music thing. So anyway, this is this episode, and it's probably the shortest episode I've done so far this season. I decided to select this. This was originally supposed to be episode 11. It was supposed to be a short episode, but because I'm kind of gearing up for the darkness and the underground concept, which I think is going to be taking 2 episodes. So, thank you for listening. Bye.